as a course blog. When I meet students, what I'm going to do is first have them check in on the blog. Then I'm going to have them schedule a meeting with me. We're going to have a 15-minute check-in over the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, they'll be able to see everything that's going on the course blog. There's a welcome message. There's a note about setting up their blogs. I'm happy to share all of this with anybody who wants it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put this course blog in the links, because what's most important right now is connection. Our students are coming into an environment that nobody was prepared for. They're already of a mindset a lot of the time that school is not really built for them. So what we've got is a situation where, I'm trying to figure out where that ambient noise is coming from. What I'm trying to figure out is, how do we establish that classroom connection? And this is something, Rick, I'm glad to see you here. We were talking about this over the summer. How do we establish that kind of classroom connection without ever having met our students? You know, last March, we had the advantage of knowing them for most of the year, so we could translate a little bit into those relationships offline. This time around, everyone's coming in cold. We're all coming into an environment that most of us have not really had a lot of experience with or prepared for. And so what's top mind for me is getting to the point where I can have the individual conversation. And I even went so far as to, on Canvas, just having a welcome message, letting them know that the Calendly link is up, that they can schedule their 15-minute meetings or less with me. And that they can also include their parents and guardians if that's comfortable for them, because, you know, one of the advantages, to come back to Denny's observation about what's going well for virtual learning, they're at home. And I know that we have a wide variety of what that means to be at home. But it is an opportunity for those students who do have family members who are concerned or wanting to be involved, to invite them to do just that. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be facilitating a conversation with a professor from Harvard who focuses on heritage language learning. One of the best ways to learn languages is by practicing in the home in a familiar environment with people in your network. Now, for those students who have uncomfortable situations at home, or situations at home that are not friendly to concentration or study, or they have trouble with internet access, that's where I want to have the conversation that says, hey, I need to do this in text, or I need to do this over the phone, or I need you to mail me stuff, or we got to figure something else out. But that, and I'm sorry about the echo, Alex, is that still happening? Okay. If there are circumstances beyond everyone's control that come up, that's not going to be known to me unless I start a conversation and have a little bit of trust and a little bit of vulnerability. And that's why I put myself out there in this way, because it's guaranteed, no matter what we do next week, that something will go wrong. And the opportunity with that is to be human, to make mistakes, be kind and forgiving of ourselves too, but also to have the kinds of conversations with the students that will invite them to take the kind of risks we all know that they have to take to learn. So, great start on that question, Denny. Did you want me to go through that presentation, or was that enough, and do you have a different question? And I'm suddenly
mainly you had an outline on the side over there, and if any of those you thought would be relevant, I just thought it was yeah. I mean, you had, and you kind of touch base. I mean, I listened to the 18-minute video, but it was just, I thought there was some good points that you made. Maybe if you could briefly just hit through those.
Sure. Well, just in brief, the high school years are years for students to create the routines and create the habits of mind and the habits in their lives that are going to support them as they become more independent, right? So I watched as my 14-year-old stepson kind of struggled with the spring, and what helped the most was developing his to-do lists, was learning how to use his phone as a personal assistant to remind him of things so he wouldn't have to constantly torture himself with that kind of stress. This is also important for us. we're going to have a lot more to do in some ways than we normally do in a school day. I can't say one thing in 2 minutes to a classroom full of students and check that box. So in terms of that first point, in terms of self-discipline and time management, I think focusing the conversation in the first week about how we establish routines. What time
No,
do we
this is
get
not
up?
going to be for me.
What time do we go to
I can already
sleep?
No.
You know, one of my favorite stories comes from
Scratch
Michael
my
Jordan's
nose. You're scaring
basketball
me.
coach. And I'm not sure who you got to play bingo with, but if your mic is on, would you mute it? When Coach started with his teams every season, he started
Oh my
by
God,
helping
people
them
don't
figure
have
out how to
to
put on their shoes and pull up their socks, because you can't play basketball if you got blisters. And we don't normally get into the business of helping people understand sleep or nutrition or balance, but now those conversations are important, because if you're on a screen all day and then you're on a screen all night playing Fortnite or on social media or whatever, you're going to be at a deficit no matter who you are or what you do. So, and by the way, I don't know how many people have worked from home, but I used to when I was a consultant, and that refrigerator is awfully close and there's nobody telling me not to. So having the kinds of routines that support me not gaining 20 pounds in a week and a half is also going to be a good thing. Does anybody have any comments or questions that they want to contribute before I hit the next topic and move through this?
Yes, if your mic is not muted, can you please mute it? It's very hard to hear, Dr. Preston. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. I was going through and trying to figure out which mics, and thanks, Daniel, for the comment. So
And
I
if
don't
I,
want to take anything
sorry,
for granted
just-
when it comes to self-discipline and
Never
time
mind.
management. I wrote a book on time 20 years ago. It hasn't changed. I'm no better at it than I was then. But it's really important to have some boundaries. So if you have push notifications on your phone, for example, turn them off. Nobody needs, I mean, if you're a brain surgeon, if you're an Air Force pilot, if somebody needs you like that, yeah, push notifications make sense. Otherwise, the only notifications you need are the ones reminding you to do the things that you don't want to have to remember all the time. Everything else you can batch. Check your email twice a day. Give yourself a 20-minute window when that's what you're going to do. And when you turn on your phone, make sure that the home screen is something that you need, as opposed to something that comes up, draws you down a rabbit hole, and costs you 20 minutes that none of us have. That's a very real problem, and I'm just as vulnerable. So I'm speaking from personal experience there. Any other comments or questions on the first point before we move on? Okay. So improved focus and concentration. Online life is not noted for helping people focus. In fact, the whole point of companies like Facebook and Snapchat is to give you the kind of targeted advertising so that somebody else is directing your attention. And we don't really have a standardized curriculum for understanding the internet or digital life. And that's on us too, because even though we're not responsible for that, we are now participating in an environment where we need to be able to advise our students. So if we're going to be smart about this, let's be vulnerable and share with our students that, yeah, when I go on social media, I get distracted because a lot of people have spent billions of dollars trying to figure out how to get my attention. And I haven't spent hardly any time thinking about mindfulness or concentration or algorithmic logic that would help me keep my attention. So recommendation number one, so that we don't have to make this more complicated than it needs to be, is to limit, again, and batch the time that we spend on media that isn't what we need to be focusing on. But as a basic practice in my courses, one of the things that I do, and I think I shared this in this presentation, is establishing a mindfulness practice. And I know that for a lot of us, if I use words like meditation, that sounds kind of exotic and out there, but it might help you to know that most of all of the research on health, whether it's hypertension or blood pressure, or whether it's cognition in terms of reading comprehension and test scores, all of that benefits by having a mindfulness practice. And you don't need to be a Zen monk on top of a mountain. It's as simple as In fact, if you guys are willing, I'll do one with you right now. If you just think about the next 60 seconds and give yourself a gift. You know, I talk fast, I talk like I do in my classroom, but with all this stress, with all this madness happening around us, I don't care what your politics, I don't care what your situation in life is, it's on us. You can't be not aware of the stress. So for the next 60 seconds, just put your feet flat on the floor. Feel that floor from your heel to your toe. Your whole foot, just connect to it. There's no past, there's no, all you've got is right now. Just take a breath. Alternate your inhale and your exhale. It works better that way. And just breathe. And you can close your eyes, you can open your eyes, but for just that 60 seconds, give yourself the present. Now, during that 60 seconds, what's likely to happen, because we're all thoughtful people and we got a lot on our minds, thoughts will come up. And we can make choices. We can choose to entertain those thoughts, focus on something, solve a problem, or we can choose to step back and observe those thoughts coming up and let them go on their way. They can be like dandelions on a breeze or leaves on a stream. But that 60 seconds, which can be made more depending on your priorities and your course and your students' needs, can have a calming effect, can have a grounding effect, can become part of your daily practice when you're not with your students. All of that is completely up to you, obviously. But when I talk about mindfulness in terms of focus and concentration, what's really important to remember is that our students are going to be pulled in all sorts of directions. I don't know what your experience was in the spring, but my students were constantly pulled to go to work, to care for younger siblings, to do more around the house, because the perception in a lot of my families was that if you're not on school, if you're not on campus and you're here, well, then I need you to do X, Y, and Z. So even knowing that those invitations are present challenged our students' ability to concentrate in the home environment. And being mindful, no matter what we do, becomes a practice. If you think about it, turning on your phone or planning a lesson or washing the dishes can all be meditative practices that don't take us away from ourselves, except when we choose to get involved. Does anybody have any questions or comments about focus and concentration? I'll add one thing, which is that how many times have we all heard a teacher and been that teacher that says, pay attention? And I don't know what currency we expect. I got told that my whole teaching and learning life because I was constantly multitasking. Well, multitasking is fine when the experiences don't demand our concentration. The challenge is that when something does require our concentration, we are not physically able to do that at 100%. It's almost like if you wrap your knuckles together and you try and experience the sensation equally in both hands, you can alternate, or you can experience both hands in a diminished way. But there's all sorts of research. One of my favorite studies is people who were eavesdropping at parties and thinking that they could participate in more than one conversation at a time. And they all reported that, yes, I was listening. And they all got information substantially wrong. They weren't actually having the experience they thought they were having. So we have limited control. And I support the fact that some of you have your videos off. I think that should be a matter of student choice. I don't support the whole surveillance control state approach to this, because some of our students are in situations where they're vulnerable. Some of our students feel like it's a private space. But at the same time, knowing that we can't necessarily control, it's really important to establish a sense of trust and practice and to see that demonstrated in the work product our students create. If I have the sense that my students can do some limited multitasking, you know, move a couple of windows around while they're listening, and I see that their work is of quality, well, I'd be more inclined to trust. And the same goes for the amount of time that students spend on their work. We all know that you can get an assignment back from 3 students and have small, medium, and large in terms of quality, but sometimes it's the student who just naturally gravitates to that particular piece of information or has previous experience, who doesn't need as much time, who does the best job. So rather than try and mandate and grip onto things like how I would manage a classroom, what I'm really interested in when it comes to mindfulness and focus and concentration with students is I would go quality over quantity. My approach with my students is, here's what I expect to be able to see as a result of our work together. And it's going to be really clear because it's all online. We can look at content. We can look at metadata. You know, when are you posting your work? Self-reporting, how long did it take you? How hard did you have to try? What parts of this were easy? What parts of this were difficult? But really thinking about their thinking is going to be important. And while I'm on that topic, I'm actually going to skip a little bit down to feedback and outcomes. I mentioned in this presentation, and I'll go to the slide if I can find it easily. We all have a lot of ways to give feedback. So this is a Google Doc, you know, with the traditional text, and I'm in front of a green screen, but I like looking at it like it's here because it's like a show to me. So we can do it in that way, but we also have tools that we can adapt how we provide the feedback. And one of those, just as an example, and I've shared this with a couple of you, but I'm going to take a minute here and show you one. Google Docs has an add-on called Kaizena, and it's an audio feedback tool. I'm just going to get the student's essay where I have an example of this so I can share it with you. Naturally, that's a hard one to find right now.
The second one, the second link. No.
Okay, can you, let me see if I can share the screen here. It says that it's working. It's nice to know that my computer says that it's working too. I'm gonna trust that also. Okay, can you all see that okay? In this upper right-hand corner, it says Kaizena. So I had a conversation with a student and I said, what would be better for you? Would it be better for me to go ahead and make the comments like I have traditionally, or would you like me to record an audio file? And she said, well, I'd like the experience of you talking to me. Would that be possible? And if it works, I'll show you.
Hi, Destiny. It's Dr. Preston. When I read this highlighted sentence, Rice makes it clear that her purpose of this speech was to let the graduates know that no matter what circumstances or background you come from, nothing is impossible. You can succeed in whatever you put your mind to. And then there's a colon. That's a lot. Proofread this sentence and see what punctuation you can add to make it more grammatically correct.
So the reason I bring this up at this point is because if we're being sensitive to our students' needs, we're demonstrating 2 things really. First is we're actually causing them to reflect on how they learn best, and to have that conversation is meaningful for them for a lot of different reasons, and hopefully improves the quality of the immediate interaction and their work. But also at the same time, we hardly ever have the chance to tailor our instruction and our feedback to our students in this way. And as long as we don't have a choice about virtual learning, I think it's really important that we take the chance to tailor it as individual as we can. I'm looking at the chat and I'm trying to track you guys as we go. Is there anything that you'd like to know more about with regard to either the focus and concentration piece or the feedback and evaluation piece?
Hey, Dr. Preston, what is the audio you used for that?
Kaizena. Here, I'll put it in the,
Thanks.
sure.
Are you guys showing videos for the chat? Oh no, we're using the chat function. How do you use that?
So I'm hearing, how do you use the chat? If you go to the bottom of the Zoom screen and scroll to the, see that toolbar? It's right in the middle with a little dialog box above it. Feels like a classroom. I'm overhearing my students.
I lost it. It was down here.
And Daniel, I see your question about the feedback embedded into Canvas. You can embed a lot into Canvas. I'm also going to say that I am a team player and a good soldier, and I've got an announcement on Canvas welcoming students to the class and redirecting them to their course blog, where they will also be making their own blogs, because in the walled garden environment, the students don't own what they create. And Canvas, along with College Board and a lot of other companies, have been exposed to mine data from student product without student permission, and they've all made a lot of money, which is wonderful for them. But when students graduate and they walk away, I want them to walk away with something. So if they have their own site, they can trade on the value of what they learn by sharing it and getting feedback and sharing it as they go forward with college admissions officers or scholarship judges or prospective employers.
Are you
So
in the Zoom? Yeah.
one of the things I like to tell
How did
people
you, what Gmail was that in?
are new to the internet environment
One that we
is
got from
if
Leslie
you're
like a
not
couple days ago.
telling your story, you can be sure that somebody else is. And whether that's a credit reporting agency, whether that's social media, whether you're tagged in pictures, there are versions of you that are online. And I really want my students to be able to have their story told by them. So that's part of my spiel about, you know, the public internet and how we use these tools. But yes, you can definitely embed Google Docs and processes along with Kaizena into Canvas. Kate, I just saw your question about the micro meetings. So to go back a step, I'm going to put that back on the screen. So when my
David, while you're addressing my question, I was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering, is it also true that the content that educators create on Canvas also doesn't belong to us? Okay.
I like owning what, now I share everything for free. So what's mine is yours. If you see anything on that Santa Maria Open Source Learning Academy site, or the 2 course blogs that I'm running this year, or anything I've ever done, if you notice, I've got a Creative Commons attribution non-commercial license on everything that I create online. And my reason for that is that I want to model for my students that the stuff that you create online isn't everybody's just because you put it online. It's everybody's if you give it to them. And in this case, I am giving it away, but I'm also making sure that other people don't use it to make money on it, because that's not the point. But I want students to understand that there are practices around copyrighted material and intellectual property online, and that, you know, they're not really given a choice as to whether or not they're going to participate in that business model. So my job is to help them understand that the internet is not a toy or even a tool at this point. It's really the nervous system of our culture. It's our economy, it's our democracy, it's our social life. So to be in that environment and not understand the environment you're in, to me, is a need that we got to address. And that's partially why I spend so much time thinking about those kinds of issues. So back to your question, when my students come into this environment and I put up a post with a lot of these ideas, I also talk about the structure of the traditional classroom and the role of the teacher as content expert and manager, and how we can shift the focus. I talk about why my students are referred to in my courses as members of a network, because this also has to do, and I'm going a little bit farther afield right now, but a lot of this has to do with what we talk about when we talk about agency. And right now in our culture, we're focused, a lot of us, on elements of racism and caste. And by the way, if you haven't picked up the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson yet, wow. I'll put that in the chat. Wow. So I want my students to be able to express themselves, to have divergent perspectives, to push back. I actually look for opportunities to lose an argument with Grace and keep the connection because we don't have too many role models for what that looks like. And, you know, I think, and Alex, I see your question about being Zoom bombed. Hasn't happened yet. And if and when it does, you know, I don't know that it's as big a crisis as some of us believe. When I first started putting people on the public internet over 10 years ago, every interview, every question I was asked ended with, "Are you afraid of being fired?" Because the internet was terrifying. There was, like, you know, gambling on the internet and porn and people selling you stuff. And I want to design for the good. Tomorrow, I'm co-hosting a webinar with Howard Rheingold, who literally coined the term virtual community with a book of the same name in 1993. And Howard's taught at Stanford and Berkeley, and he's widely regarded as, you know, somebody who's been 20 years ahead of his time in predicting internet. But he talks a lot about, you know, who are we designing for? Are we designing out of fear or are we designing out of trust? So when and if a student says something negative or inappropriate this year, out of literally millions of artifacts over the last decade, they will be the first one. When students don't post, when students don't participate, it's easy for us to make assumptions. To me, that's the beginning of an interesting conversation. Like, what happened? You get trapped under something heavy? They turn the internet off? You know, where are we at and how can I help is usually my first response. Now, if there's an ongoing problem or if there's a problem with one particular Zoom code, well, then I'll deal with passwords and I'll deal with, you know, changing the code or changing the URL. But if you notice, this morning, I publicly posted the link and I did it on Twitter as well. And so far, we're all right. So back to the introduction and Kate's question about the micro meetings. So we come to the meeting, we have this environment, and I've asked students to schedule a meeting with me. So I just set up a free account on Calendly for the purpose. Students can go there. And for that matter, now you can too, I suppose. You know where the link is. And we can say a quick hello and get to know each other. And if they'd like to invite anybody else from their home environment or their network, I'm happy to include them as well. So Kate, that was a long answer to a short question. Did I cover it?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So to come back to our list, self-pacing is going to be really important. I don't know how you are planning to set up your direct instruction. For my, again, and this is a humble offering, it's not even a recommendation because we're all so different and I respect everybody's got a different personality and a different style, not to mention different disciplines and academic. But for me, my presentations are going to be 5 to 15 minutes long, both because I really want to focus on very specific ideas, but most importantly, I want to take advantage of the synchronous time, the time that students share with me in time, like this meeting is a synchronous meeting. I want to emphasize the interaction during that time. I want people to be collaborating. I want people to be speaking up, asking questions, getting what they need, because the reality is it's very hard for any of us to pay attention to an hour-long presentation. And that's even when it's in person. But in screen environment, it's way too long. And again, when people talk about what we're missing by not being on campus, it's not the content, it's not the curriculum, it's the physical energy, the being with each other, the nonverbal communication, the paraverbal communication. And you know, you can't really get in somebody's face like you can when you're in person. So I really want to, in my courses, I've got more than enough content. And if I go back to that course blog for a moment, there is more than enough content even at this point for us to read and discuss. You know, we've got, well, actually in this course, I haven't posted a bunch of readings. I'll go to my world literature course so you can see that. So in world literature this year, we've got light reading like Les Miserables. That's only 1,000 pages. That should take a little bit. And the nice thing is, because we've got access to everything, and most of the course content that is in the traditional canon is not copyright protected, we've got the whole thing. And for those students who want it in a different format, they can listen. I'm also going to be starting a podcast in which I read and comment like I would in class so that students can hear that. But the thing that I started that with was that my explicit stuff is going to be like 5 to 10 minutes long. All of this is going to take the students a lot of time. Reading anything, you know, in my American Lit class, reading on Self-Reliance by Emerson, that's a big chunk. And they're not going to understand most of what they read the first time around. In fact, that's my expectation. I usually ask students to read and just form a first impression. Then they'll go on their course blogs and they'll be able to share that first impression, and then we'll have a basis for a conversation. That's me when I was 5. This is last year's blog. You can see how this gets populated with articles or with texts. And so they'll read something like Young Goodman Brown, and then they'll comment on it. And I'll be able to see everything they do because I maintain a directory of member blogs. This is all the students. And you can see a lot when you go to these. You get to see who's designing. And by the way, yes, most of them did drop off in March, but a lot of them didn't. Some students cranked right up until the very end. But we also have design. We've got senses of humor. We've got all sorts of things that tell us about what the students are thinking. And those are great bases for conversations. So that way, when we get together in our synchronous meetings during class time, I can have more of a conversation. And just like I'm doing with you, and just like I do in class with the projector, I'll throw up the blog of the week or something that really spoke to me or something that made me think or even change my mind. And the nice part of that is that the students get to start taking the stage as soon as they're comfortable. By the end of the year, I have them do what I call big questions. And I put it up here. And students come up with all of these. In fact, I'll put up last year so that you can see some examples. They come up with all of these wonderful things that they want to explore and they've never had a chance to in class. And every single one of those questions is interdisciplinary by nature. If you show me a cup of tea, I'll show you botany, ceramics, fluid mechanics, and the history of colonialism. Let me get to last year's big questions here. There's more here than I thought. All right, let's do it this way. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, can you see that? Are you looking at my screen? Or are we still on? There we go. Okay. So here's a sampling from last year. Who created the alphabet? Are there any other planets? Why would they start building a new building while school just started? You know, all of this stuff. And you say on one hand, hey, Preston, this is an American literature class. What are you doing? Well, they're researching and writing about all of this. And some of these topics are personal and powerful. And they're all immediately individually relevant because the students choose them. Now, I brought this up because where I lead my students from day one is if we have the kind of conversations where they're asking questions and they're sharing what they wrote and they're owning their own words, both in an intellectual property sense, but also a personal integrity sense. By the end of the year, usually around mid-April, they start teaching. And at that point, we've talked a lot about cognition. We've talked a lot about how people learn. I shared with you how I tailor feedback and they've come to understand that. So at this point, I'm now working with them to design how they want to present the research that they've been doing in parallel as we've been going through the traditional standardized curriculum all year long. And now they'll be able to say on their resume that they've taught a high school class, not just given, I can't stand classroom parties and I can't stand presentations because they're boring, but I love fully catered learning experiences and I love what I call the Masterpiece Academy. I also love going way off topic because I don't even remember the question that started me on this one. What were we talking about? Somebody want to bring me back? Was it the micro meetings or was it the feedback? Oh, Dan,
I think someone wanted to know what calendar you use to schedule the micro meetings.
yeah, I just saw that too in the text. It's Calendly. And
Calendly.
oh, thank you, Amy. Let me get the link so I can share that with you. Okay, it looks like it's going to share with you, but it's going to share my login if I'm not careful here. So get rid of that. And there you go. Okay, so if I'm working that list, again, I'm going to go back to the outline that we talked about. So I've covered engagement, I've covered personalized instruction and support. Let's talk a little bit about the power of the network. What we're doing right now is immensely valuable. And I'm not saying that presumptuously to you. I'm saying that because it's really valuable to me. I've missed my colleagues. I've missed teaching. And it feels good to be like doing this. So value number one for our students is you're not alone. And there are times these last few months when we've all felt, whether it's we're alone in our homes or we're alone in our opinions about the epidemiology or the way that everything has been politicized, or we're alone because people just don't understand what it's like to teach, especially right now. But we're not alone. So the first emphasis that I want to put with our students is they're not alone either. And I don't mean that like you're not alone because I see you. I mean like you got support. And in a separate video to this one, I talked a lot about empathy. And right now, man, oh man, I don't know a single person who's being honest with themselves who doesn't need empathy. Me too. So it's going to be really important to think about how we approach those initial conversations with our students. It's not going to be like overly caring and problem solving, and I feel sorry for you, but it's also not going to be like, you know, sometimes the classroom environment lends itself to a mechanized approach. I got 176 students that I'm coming up with. Now, if I have a 15-minute meeting with each one of those 176 students, that's 44 hours. And yeah, I'm going to do as many of those as I possibly. Every single kid who signs up, we're going to have a meeting. Every single kid who doesn't, I'm going to find them and ask them why. But in the meantime, it's really important to have some connection. But there's way more valuable elements to a network. You know, in school, I've never gotten over the fact that in school, the mantras are, you know, be quiet, ask permission, use your own words, keep your eyes on your own paper. And the first question people always get asked when they come into organizations is, why can't you be a better team player? Why can't you communicate more effectively? So starting now, because we're in this environment and it naturally aligns with the medium that we're in, you know, Marshall McLuhan's coming up big for me these days. He's the guy that said the medium is the message. He's got a few great lesser known quotes too. And one of my favorites is, if you're trying to tell a difference or make a meaningful distinction between education and entertainment, you don't really understand either one. So for our students, those 5 to 15 minute like bites, I'm using all the tech I can because I want to make those entertaining and compelling and interesting. And I want them to be short because I want to leave them wanting more, just like any good showman. I'm told. I'm not one. But that's on the like asynchronous side. But the network part of this What do people do when they're trying to develop business? They join a networking group. And now we can. So yes, my students are all going to get to know each other fairly quickly. In fact, let me show you this. I have on my course blog what I normally do in my classroom, which is going to be interesting. In my classroom every year, I have a treasure hunt. I'll ask students to answer a few basic questions. You know, why are you in this class? What do you hope to accomplish? A good contact phone number and a good email for you. But beyond that, I also do an icebreaker. And the way I do it is after I ask these kind of formulaic questions, I ask them to describe something eccentric about themselves. And we have a built-in vocabulary word because most of them don't know eccentric. And I don't want it to be embarrassing or scandalous, just something interesting and unique. So here I wrote, you know, a fun fact about your family, pets, travels, hobbies, likes, dislikes, or fears, or whatever they'd like to share. Past answers have included, and this is legit, I have gotten these answers. I have a fear of elbows, or I've never flown on an airplane, or I arrange my shirts by colors, or I don't like my foods to touch different foods on my plate. So they turn these in, I get their answers, and then I create a treasure hunt. I make a big list. And as soon as one person finds the people that goes with each one of these wacko answers, they win. And usually they win a copy of a book that I've written or a book that I've loved. This year, I'm going to be sending them a book online. But that's a way for them to get to know each other and start conversations. And that's an in-class network. I also network between my courses. I want my students to see that they're not alone in doing the kinds of things I'm asking them to do. So this year, the member blogs are bare because my students haven't yet created their blogs, but they're all waiting for each other. And any course that's the same course is going to be aware of people even if they're in a different period. On campus, this is helpful because a lot of friends are in the same course but a different period, so they can connect and find out who's doing what. By the way, seeing each other's work is a wonderful way to learn. If I see that you have a blog where you've embedded a video or a PDF, and I don't know how to do that, but it looks really cool, I get to comment and ask you, and I have an instant teacher that's not like that middle-aged white guy. So it's really important to be able to share this stuff. And if you're worried about, well, will students copy each other's work? I've had exactly one instance over 10 years of doing this when that happened. And it was so embarrassing. I mean, you can see the timestamp. You can see when someone's copied somebody else's work. It's not hard to figure out who came first. And I don't know who felt worse about the conversation, the person or me, but it hardly ever happens. What does happen is that people exchange ideas and improve the quality across the board. And if they have any questions about asking permissions, they get really good at that because we talk about the licensing and the fact that when you create something, someone can't just walk into your house and take it. Well, this is your blog. So if you choose to share it, that's lovely. Can't steal what's being freely given, but you got to have that conversation. Same thing on campus when people take pictures of each other and ask permission to post. I got a great tweet the other day. In fact, I'll hold it up. Rick, I just got your text. I got a text from somebody who found the videos that I put up and sent it to me. And I even said, hey, can I put this up on a website? But before I showed it to anybody, like even right now, it was really important to me to ask permission. And I have my students do the same thing because we don't really have, you know, they walk around a campus with surveillance cameras and nobody asks permission. So they need to understand what a model of ethics looks like on the internet so that they know what is okay and what's not. So we talked about a couple levels of the network, but I'm not even close to being finished with the value of a network because what happens as students learn about their learning styles and they learn about what they want to get good at, they also start to realize that the world is a little bit more of a generous place than they've been led to believe. And there are a lot of people out there with the expertise that they want and the experience that they admire. Go find them and send them a note and introduce yourself and ask them if they'd like to take a look at what you've done or if there's something that you can contribute to their work or volunteer on. So students in this environment, you know, when I teach a normal on the ground class, I do all the same stuff, but it seems like, you know, Martian, because the rest of the student's day is compartmentalized, and often, you know, all of you do innovative things. And one of my favorite things, it's a horrible gift we've been given to have to do things in this way, but one of my favorite things about the last few months is I've learned more about what my colleagues do in their classrooms than I ever did before. And we all have that chance now. That's why I'm sharing these links with you. You'll be able to see day to day everything that I'm doing if you have that kind of time and you're halfway interested. But one of the things that I see in my students is that they're using a textbook, or they're being told in the traditional way how things will run in different classes. And they come to my class and I do this stuff and it's like,
And
wait, what?
unstable internet once in a while.
And now
Um,
that we're all doing a version of this stuff, we have a chance to make this more aligned. So I'm going to tell my students, hey, if you see something else out there, there's an edX class or a Harvard or an MIT class that you want to take, or there's a webinar that you want to explore, awesome. And would you please like ask whether it's okay to share stills or a recording, or bring us back something, or post about it on your blog. And if you're building the kind of network in college, what we do is we talk about how students should approach their professors. Well, this is great practice. If there's somebody who's teaching physics and you've got a physics question, and I know I can introduce you to a colleague, well, now we're expanding our network on a pull basis. We don't have to have a question about motivation or anything, because the student's driving the process. But by the time they leave this course and leave this, I see that I froze. What part did I freeze on? I just saw that note in the chat.
You were going to say something about, what was it? And then,
Dang it. Well, there's a recording of this, so hopefully it was just a local thing. And if not, that was the meaning of life, and now I forgot it. But when we talk about networks, I want my students to come out of this, and my dog is part of my network, with a group of people that they know are going to give them honest critique, that they know are going to give them support, that they have even a mentor character or two or three whose experience that they admire and they respect and want to learn from. I had a kid a few years ago who wanted to learn how to fly an airplane, and some of you know this story, so forgive me, but I like it a lot. And when Matt Reynolds came into my class and said that this is what he wanted to do, the conversation came up because he was just not doing the work. And I said, you know, what's going on? He wasn't a problem. He just didn't want to do the work. And he told me the truth. And actually, I'll scroll down to what he said on his blog. He wrote me that high school was a waste of time. And I said, well, okay, I don't take offense at that, but what are we talking about here? And what Matt meant was that he just wanted to learn to fly. And he was going to go take aviation at San Jose State. He already had a plan. I said, well, I can't do anything about teaching you to fly, but there's probably somebody in the community who can. And that person turned out to be Ed at Lompoc Airport. And Matt studied with Ed, blogged about it, completed his requirements for expository comp. And 3 months after we had that initial conversation, I was in the back seat of a Piper Tri-Pacer 3,000 feet above school. At that point, I was at Rivetti. And thank God, the kid knew what he was doing. But when you curate like this, you know, multiple choice made sense 30 years ago when 1 gig of memory cost $300,000. Now, we can curate in all of these media. You know, even what we're doing right now would have been considered magical 10, 15 years ago. We get to do all of these things in a way that takes advantage of the environment that we have to be in. And that's really the flavor of what I was trying to get across in that presentation on the video. I think at this point, what I'd love to do with the time that we have remaining together, I've presented more than I intended, but I'm really grateful for your questions. Is there anything that you'd like to know more about any of the tools? Is there a question about getting started on Blogger or WordPress? Is there anything else on your minds that I can address? And you can go ahead and unmute your mic if you want to ask, or you can put it in the chat. I'm watching both. Well, this is
Blogging.
like teaching a classroom class. As soon as I ask for questions, it gets totally quiet. I've been watching people talk the whole time, but now it's like,
Okay, the blogger.
okay. Super, super easy. I would love to say that I'm a computer programming guy. I'm not. I know nothing about coding. But blogger.com, and I'll put this in the chat as well, is what I use for the specific reason that it's easier than anything else. So I'm going to put that here. Go to the link, and can you see that? Oh, let me get my screen shared back again. So are you seeing that now on the screen?
David, I think you sent that in the chat to me privately,
Oh,
which I appreciate, but I'm sure everyone else is going.
thanks, Rick. Let me get that back here. Oh, wow, it's got everyone but at the bottom of my list now. Okay, thanks. Okay. So on Blogger, all you need to do is sign in. If you have Google or Gmail, that's the easiest because it's a Google product, but you can sign in with any credentials. Creating an account is free. When you sign in, and I will also put a link to a post that I put up for students with step-by-step in case you don't want to follow it or do it right now. But the steps are pretty straightforward. You'll sign in, and then I'm going to go to a sample dashboard here.
Nice picture.
When you do sign in, you will be given the opportunity to create your name for the blog. I'm a big fan of alliteration, so I like, Isaiah's Ideas or Alicia's Academy or whatever else. See if I can scroll down to there, how to. For the URL, as a teacher, you can do whatever you like. You see here, I've done Dr. Preston's, Dr. Preston's, AMLIT, SMHS 2021. That's just a formula that I've used for a long time, and I just update the year or the course. But you can name it whatever you like, and it's .blogspot.com. It'll ask you if you want a domain name, just hit no thanks. I tell my students that I want to do everything for free. Of course, later on, if you get a better idea for the name, or if you want to make it more public or use it for different purposes, you can do all sorts of extensions. You can create a vanity domain, or you can put in whatever you want. And my students also understand that you can use it primarily for the course, and they do, but you can also add pages or dimensions to it, or just do things that you like. I mean, every once in a while, I'll put something up on the course blog that isn't relevant to the day's lesson or the text that we're reading, just because it's relevant. That came up for me when we had all of the issues around the police in the spring. So after that, all you gotta do is hit the orange button that says create the blog and enjoy that sweet, sweet feeling of success I wrote. Rather than go through, because we have quite a few people on board with us today, rather than go through the process with each of you, what I'm happy to do, you have my Calendly link now. If you want to set up a meeting, or if you just want to ping me on email and set up a time, I'm happy to walk through the process and work with you individually. It'll take us literally just a few minutes, but it's something I'm happy to do if it's helpful to you. And with that, I'm just going to come back to the list to make sure we haven't left anything out. One of the things that is interesting to me, and it happened here today as well, is that I'll come in with an unstructured question and I'll say, what's valuable for you and how can I help? And what typically happens is that students or colleagues will come to a structure. In this case, it was from one of the videos that I posted. It's kind of like the reason I don't have a seating chart. because after the first couple of days, everybody sits in the same place all year long. And we benefit from that sort of structural support. But that's why I came back to the list. Is there anything that anybody else wanted to see more about? Or do you want me to spend more time on the blogs today? I'm happy to do whatever you think is valuable.
To what you're presenting with, having your head in there and zooming it back and all was really cool.
Yeah, I like this. This is an app that's in beta. If I get jealous of Rick being so gorgeous, I can go green. I can actually start to be invisible and disappear. I like that effect. I gotta make sure I bring myself back though. The actual room where I'm sitting, I'm in front of a green screen right now. The app is called and I can get you an invitation. It's only Mac friendly, but I'm happy to share. They're only doing it on a limited invitation basis right now. I was sort of a guinea pig for them.
Boo, only Mac?
Yeah,
Boo.
sorry.
Does that work for iPads?
That's a great question. I will forward that to them. I don't know. But I'll ask them today. I've got a few questions for them about other stuff, so I'll email them after we get off the call.
Okay, thanks.
And by the way, if anybody does have access or does want to play on we can do things together. We can actually, if anybody wants to be a guest speaker in my class or play, interactively, we can do all of that. So if you want to go on, here, I'm going to put up a book review for Cast. But if anybody wants to get that app and play, I'm happy to do that. Let me find the chat. I'm actually going to give you a link to the book at Powell's because I have religious objections to Amazon at this point. I can't believe that someone is even thinking about making $1 trillion in this world right now, the way things are. So that's my one political rant for the day. While I'm getting that link for you, is there anybody else who's got questions? And I noticed that Karen Draper is with us. And Karen, I know you've been doing stuff online with students for a long time. So I'm going to buy myself a minute and also take advantage of your expertise. From the practices that you use with your students, is there anything that you'd like to share with us that you think would be valuable?
I had the advantage of using our business department server for years, and I've been able to do everything that Canvas does in a much easier environment. But it's not available anymore, so I'm a new student.
Oh gosh.
And learning a lot.
Yeah, I'll bet. And doing it with grace as usual.
Not sure about that. Doing it from home.
Well, if there's anything I can do, let me know.
I would be glad to let you know. In fact, I'm interested in blogging, and I went to log on and discovered that I had set one up, but it was in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a good year. That was the year my daughter was born. She's 11. So I look at her and think of your blog and how much it has matured by now.
Not.
Okay.
I had a student, and I think I posted this, but I had a student who graduated in 2013 from Rigetti, and he contacted me a few weeks ago because he's starting his career as a teacher. And so we did a Zoom call, and the first thing I did was, for nostalgia's sake, I put his blog on the screen, and he just cracked up because he had forgotten all about it and didn't realize it was still there. That is a really good point that I didn't know I needed to make, but thanks, Karen, because one thing that is true about all of this is that the blogs that we create are there for as long as we want them to be. You know, I have a really poignant example of this because I had a student who passed away at Rigetti in a street racing crash, and her blog is still there. And, you know, when students see that, I don't know if anybody here knew Brianna Rodriguez, but that was a very poignant reminder for us for the rest of the year, and for me still, because it's still there, that, you know, our students aren't necessarily aware even now. The internet is 50 years old. And when students look at a screen, they still have a sense that they're watching television. And they're not aware of the fact that the screen's watching them right back and tracking what they do and using that to point them in different directions. Every time you like something, every time you click on something, you're giving the computer information, and whether it's Facebook or whether it's a well-meaning nonprofit, it's gathering information, or the NSA, about your preferences to help guide you where it thinks you want to go. So a couple of things. In the 50s, if you were an African-American person and you went to a restaurant and the maitre d' guided you to where it thought you wanted to go, I think we can all identify the problem there, right? So when we do a search and we get autocomplete and we get a limited number of responses, we're being guided to a part of the library where it thinks we want to go. So for search, I like to use DuckDuckGo because it does not keep, first of all, it's more fun to say than anything else, but it does not keep a search history from what you put up before. So you have a better chance of the next search being unbiased, right? Uninformed by your previous decisions. The second thing I'd like to recommend for, again, for privacy's sake, is that you use Firefox as a browser. Now I know that that creates handshake issues if you're, you know, a Google person and you're on Chrome, or if you already have, you know, a pre-existing relationship, or Canvas handshakes nicely with the tools that you're using. I don't say it for those reasons, but at least for your personal use, you might consider Firefox. If you're a person who has something confidential that you want to text and you don't want it out there, you might consider using Signal instead of SMS. These are basic ideas that I think everybody should have, and we don't really talk about them in school very much. But as a personal user, you know, I think that you should be aware of who has access to what and under what conditions. Any other questions?
All right, since Noel's popped in, I'll toss another one. All right, now I don't know how much experience you've had working with special ed kids, but we're gonna, I've got 4 classes of sped kids, and you know, each year the students' abilities have gotten a little bit lower and lower, that they're bringing them into the regular ed classes. Some of the kids now that we're getting would have been in a what I call maybe just a special day class, or they would have maybe even been in a little bit lower level class. And now things seem to be expanding. They're giving them more opportunities, which are great, but this staying connected is going to be a challenge for some of these kids. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, I think about the hands-on disciplines and how to replicate that in the home environment. And then I think about our ELL students and our special education students. They've been on my mind all summer long, and I'm afraid there's not an easy answer for the kids who really need that personal, physical warmth, that touch, that look in the eyes up close. The best I can do is to say, really think about the paraverbal and the nonverbal cues that you use in the classroom. So the things like getting up close and personal, I teased about it earlier when I got close to the camera, but you can replicate some of that. You know, I think this is a good time, and I want to come back to the skill level and differentiation in the course environment. But first, Denny, I think, you know, this is a good time to talk about the basics of how we appear on the internet. I'm pretty intentional about lighting. I'm pretty intentional about, you know, when you talk to some people online, they've either got the interrogation lighting, right? Like the single light bulb that's illuminating the top half of their head, or they've got the horror story at the campfire light, you know, that's coming up from the bottom, or they've got a window open so that they're like a 50-50 bar and they're half in darkness, like some sort of, you know, Darth Vader Star Wars thing. And being aware of how that comes across is no less important than being aware of the background that you have, or of the room, or of like how you dress to go to school. I mean, to me, these are basics, but I don't want to take any of that for granted because it all creates an impression. Somewhere in one of these presentations, I talked about the research of Albert Moravian, who did research in the 70s that basically pointed to the idea the content of the words that we use accounts for less than 10% of the meaning that people take away. It's that old thing my mom said to me when I was a kid. It's not what you said, David, it's how you said it. And so for all of those times that you're in a classroom and you're modulating your voice, how loudly you speak, how quickly you speak, whether or not you pause, I didn't freeze, to get people's attention. All of those little things become much more explicit in this environment. So having some reflection with yourself, or even with a colleague, to go online and just dish for a few minutes, give a half a lesson, and ask about, you know, how it came across. Thinking about directing questions to individuals, basically not doing what I've done. I just kind of say, hey, are there any questions? Because I'm in a room full of adults that I think are pretty assertive, confident people. But when I'm working with students, I'm much more likely to say, hey, Denny, you know, I'm wondering what it's like to be you right now, and how did that question come across? All of those little moments become really important, and listening can be its own like 15-minute riff for me. Listening is a totally different animal than hearing, and it requires a different level of presence. You know, if you're not exhausted when you get off of a Zoom call, you probably didn't listen very well. And I say that because I'm drained at the end of the day right now, because being present with people and really like getting what they're saying and catching myself when my mind wanders a little bit, that takes work. So that's kind of step number one. But what I heard you asking, Denny, was about how if we have lower level students, you know, who are either experiencing cognitive difficulties or don't have the background, or there's some other, you know, real significant challenge, how do we deal with that? I think that's where the one-on-one meetings and figuring out what kind of support they have at home matters a whole lot more. And that's why I'm scheduling, you know, part of what I'm doing in those 15-minute meetings is letting students know that they're not invisible. There's no back row on the internet where you can slink down and not be seen like you can in the classroom. But the other part of it is, this is my opportunity for a little diagnostic work. I want to know, were they able to schedule a meeting? Could they make 2 clicks in the commitment? When did they choose to schedule it? Is there a favorable part of the day? How did they seem to me when they showed up online? What was their, you know, first cognitive impression? All of those little things, I try to I wring meaning out from just about everything. So, and it's not the assumption kind of meaning, it's just trying to get as much information through my senses as possible so that I can ask better questions. Does that make sense, Denny?
Yes, and you know, also because I've not had a lot of experience with this, bringing these kids in and getting them engaged, you know, because after I watched your 3 videos, man, it just seemed like that is one of the more powerful things, how to get these kids engaged and get them engaged to the point they'll connect with other students. Yeah. Because, you know, so many of these kids, man, have lived in isolation. Even when they were in school, they go home. Yeah. They don't interact with a lot of buddies.
I'll never forget, I was doing research in Los Angeles around the time of the Rodney King riots, and the young men who pulled Reginald Denny out of his truck and beat him and started the violence, one of them had never been out of a 6-block radius around his house. And I can't pretend, I can be in empathy with my students from the standpoint that I care about them, I'm in presence with them, and I'll listen and read everything they want to share with me. But I can't pretend to know, as a middle-aged white guy from LA, what it's like to be them at this moment growing up in Santa Maria. And so They may have a vast social network. They may not talk to anybody. You might be absolutely right. And the only way I'm going to find out is by creating a space where they at least are invited to feel comfortable in being in conversation and sharing where they're at and what they're hoping for or what they're challenged by. If they can't have access to the internet, which is also a civil rights and human issue as far as I'm concerned, but if they don't have high-speed broadband, then that's also something we need to address. There is a wonderful app that I'm working on sharing with the district and seeing if I can get us some license. Oh, great. This is perfect. So it's called Arist, but my autocorrect keeps wanting to make it aristocrat. Isn't that a sign of the times? But there's a link that I just posted. Actually, it's not a link, sorry, it's just the name of it, but it's arist.co. And this is all text-based. So if we have students who do not have, you know, Zoom capability, or they have to share a computer, or for whatever reason that's not as viable, I'm exploring right now building some courses and building some quizzes using text so that they can play on a channel that's more available to them. And
Would that be easier on their phones as well?
yeah. Yeah, it's designed for their phones. And I can share, you know what I'll do is I'll put up some screenshots on that Academy blog. And, you know, and Academy is a fancy way of saying it. That was the district's request, but basically that's just a blog where I'm going to be blogging for us and anybody, parents, community members, anybody who wants or needs ideas or wants to play and contribute. Because I got a pretty good idea. There's 45 participants right now. I got a pretty good idea that 45 minds are better than one. And all of you have at least something that you're doing that's friggin' awesome. And I want to learn from that and include that as we build a database of ideas and tools and stuff that people are doing throughout. So thanks for the question, Denny. Does anybody else have, back to my open-ended, non-targeted, Julieta, what's on your mind?
Hey, David, how are you?
Thanks.
I love this. You know, I'm kind of struggling with my blog, actually. I was trying to get it up and running, and it's just, I guess, I wish I could watch some kind of video on just like the logistics, how to, you know, put links in there. I don't know.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what I'll do. I will put up a, I'll capture my screen as I navigate around and do some of that stuff. But for now, would it be helpful just to go to a Blogger dashboard and show you a couple tricks? Is that something that's interesting to people?
Yeah, like just embedding videos,
Sure.
you know, links to other documents, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's do that. So here I'll do a sample post. And, you know, this is how, like, I'm embarrassed by this because when people look at my blogs, especially on Blogger, they act impressed sometimes, and that embarrasses me because you'll see why in a second here. So I'm on my dashboard, and I'll click on the big orange button that says New Post. Now I get another dashboard, and I've got a choice. I can compose, like, as soon as my computer cooperates, like this, or I can click over into hypertext markup language and do it like this. Now, when I compose visually, I don't see all of the code, but when I compose in HTML, I can. That's fun for a couple of reasons. Let's say I want to put in a YouTube video. And I'll come up with an oldie but goodie because apparently this came up. So I'll find an old video that I like. This is from 6 years ago, and I'll say I want to share it. Well, I'll get an embed code. If I get the embed code and copy that, if I go back to my blog and I put it in the visual, then what I'll get when I publish it looks exactly like that. by going into hypertext markup language, which makes me sound like a super cool coder, but again, that's not me. But if I go into HTML and I put that language in and I adjust it just a little bit for Blogger's width, and now I post it, how cool is that? Poof, it's there. So part of understanding the posting environment is just knowing the difference between those two buttons. The nice thing about the rest of this menu is that it's all explainable by hovering over the button. So I can add or remove a link. If I want to make something into a link, then I can just select the URL where I want it to go. And I can hit the link button. And I can update my blog, go back to view blog. And now when I look at that post and I click on where I put that link, it takes me where I want the viewer to go. And Julieta, I heard you ask about pictures as well. You can upload anything from your computer just by inserting image, and you can also upload it from the internet. It gives you choices. But I think for a longer, more complete answer, what I'll do is I will play around a little bit like I just did, except well, guess what? Since we're recording this call, that actually will be on the video that I post on the Santa Maria blog later today. But I'll also do a more dedicated one if you have specific questions. Oh, wow, Karen, I just read about your schedule. No sweat, they're there. But if you, how about we do this? I'll post this recording. As people have specific questions, go ahead and comment to this post with anything that you want specific. I'll be like your virtual learning jukebox. If it's how to post a video, if it's how to link to a different blog, if it's how to create a virtual community, I'll go ahead and speak to any one of those things, and I'll either put up a different video or I'll just capture my screen and walk you through it. Does that work?
Thank you so much, David. That was great.
Happy to do it. This is making me happy because I want to be valuable, and this year is going to be interesting. So thanks for the question. Anybody else? Oh, Karen's asking where the Santa Maria blog is. So let me get that URL for you. I also want to quickly pitch that tomorrow I am going to be having that webinar with Howard Rheingold. So if anybody is available at 11:30 and wants to participate, I put the link. I think I put a post about it on this blog. If not, then I will. No, I haven't yet. So I'll put that up immediately after this call. For my part, I'm recognizing that we're at an hour and a half, and I know that some of you have like 1,000 things to do. So I want to make sure that you feel like us being here now is customized to what you need. And if there's anybody who's got questions, I'll stay on as long as you need me. And if not, then I know you got a slam day, and I'm happy to say this is the point where I'm going to invite you to do what you need to do in the way that you need to do it. So does anybody else have any questions?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. You and I have talked a lot this summer about our trepidation on trying to engage students and get that rapport that we do in the classroom. And the more and more I thought about that, I came up with a bright spot. These kids, especially the ones in my class, they're used to watching these videos, all these vloggers and stuff. So they start to develop these fictitious relationships with them. So I suppose our generation, I think that we do have an opportunity here. And if we use, like you said, keep it interesting, throw a lot of different media at them, that will keep them engaged. I think we'll get better results than what you and I were previously worrying and lamenting about earlier in the summer.
Yeah, so are you thinking about the focus and how they are with you when they're online with you, or can you say more about that?
Well, not just the focus online talking to me, but the media that like my flipped classrooms, right? Giving them videos to watch and stuff like that. I think, I don't know, and I could be wrong, but the more I thought about them, they do that a lot. When they get free time, they jump online and they watch kids play video games. They're not playing the video game.
Yeah.
They watch like the professionals play those video games and they learn from that. So this form of learning, although alien and foreign to us, is kind of right up their alley. So I'm feeling a little more confident than I was, say, in the beginning of summer when we started those conversations.
I'm really glad to hear that. I just posted the link to the webinar for tomorrow. But to Rick's point, our students are learning all the time. Learning itself is asynchronous. How many times have you left a conversation, you've been coming back, and you thought of just the right thing you wanted to say 2 hours after the fact? And that happens to us all the time. Yeah. So when I think about how our students learn, they're not, like you said, Rick, when they watch video games, they're gaming the game. They're watching YouTube to get the Easter eggs and to get the shortcuts in the game. And I say use that. It's the same way when students text and their language is grammatically incorrect or they're using abbreviations that don't actually exist. That's good. That's a different language. And they're doing it that way because it's less expensive and more effective. And they're getting the results that they want. So when we talk about, like, if you remember your Krashen or your Vygotsky with social learning, when we talk about code switching, we've got a different learning code now because digital does not work the same as analog. I used to listen to a tape or an album from beginning to middle and end. That's how I read a book. Our students don't operate with information in the same way. And so if we can somehow manage to find a way to lever how they actually engage and also then bake in and backfill how they need to understand beginning, middle, and end so that they get the deeper meanings, even if it's a contract or a mortgage, that's really important. And they need to develop the habits of mind to get them there. But to start with, I think we can meet them in their field a little bit more and trust and demonstrate that in a way that brings them a little bit closer so that they can kind of cozy up to the campfire and then see what's keeping us all warm. Does that make sense?
Totally. I agree.
And Daniel, I'm reading your question here. I will be working with ELD students this school year and distance learning will present many challenges. Yes. I'm happy to see this. And there's two things that I want to show. One is I'm going to get the blog back on the screen behind me because on every blog that I use, let me get back to one of this year's course blogs. So on this course blog, if you go down a little bit, there is a translate button. And this translate button has lots of different choices. In case, it's kind of fun to see what the blog looks like in Arabic. The only beef that I have with this, because you can translate it into Spanish easily, it's down here. But the only beef I have with this is that it's not in Mixteco. So there's a site that I found that does translate into Mixteco, and I'll share that as well. The other thing that's important about this is that learning in the home presents another opportunity. On August 29th, I'll be doing another webinar with a Harvard professor who specializes in heritage language learning, speaking and learning a second language through real-time relevant experiences with your family, with your environment, with your network. And Maria is fantastic. In fact, I got to know her through collaborating around the text-based messaging. So if you're available on the 29th, I know that's a school day and I know it's in the middle of the day, but I will post the link and the invitation to that webinar. I will also post a recording of it. So if you can't make it live, it'll be available.
Yeah, if you can share that translation site, Dr. Preston, for the Mixteco. I'm surprised that even exists just because there's so many variants of Mixteco. And I mean, I have a challenge just even speaking it in class.
Yeah, and I remember a couple times admiring you greatly.
find a wheel for
I
yours.
cannot.
This one or
Um,
this one?
I'm going to find that link for you and I'll post it. While I'm doing that, I'm open if anybody else has a question.
Hey, John, do you think you can mute your mic, please? Thanks.
Daniel, I'll tell you what, will you do me a favor and actually, you don't have to do anything. What I'll do is I'll create a separate post on this Santa Maria blog later today. I'm now keeping a list of things I got to do. And I will, if I didn't already post it, I'll make sure that I just have a translate post and I'll post the link to that website, okay?
Thanks, appreciate it.
No problem. I'm going to put this back into English so I can read it better. You know, one of the things, speaking of language, and I always try to take the opportunity to learn with my students. I will be taking my own courses this year right along with them. And part of the reason for that is it's important for me at least to model that I don't ask them to do anything that I wouldn't personally do myself. And that includes writing an essay or giving a speech. In fact, when I've talked with different organizations, I brought my students along via computer and they've co-presented with me or at least seen me do it so that they know that I'm not just, you know, leading from the back. But when it comes to especially Spanish in our community, hay muchas palabras que no me recuerdo porque no practico bastante. And that's about as fluent as I get because the rest of the time I think in English and then I have to search for the word and I still can't conjugate verbs and I'm only in my 50s. So I also let them know that that extra step is meaningful to me. It doesn't show up in the box score. In fact, a lot of the work that our students do mentally and emotionally doesn't show up in the grades. And I want to find a way to honor that with them because they're doing a lot of work. And like you say in your question, Daniel, this is not going to be easy for a lot of people. So just letting them know and slowing things down, you know, the first couple of weeks, really slowing things down is going to be important, not in the sense of a pacing plan or standardized whatever. I'm a whole lot less concerned about that than I am about, like I said, we're learning all the time. Before students get to high school on a normal day and a normal year, they're thinking about where the bathrooms work. They're thinking about who not to get in the way of so they don't get beat up. There's learning all the time. And this year, it's going to be even more so. Whether it's the technology or whether it's the teacher personalities online or however it goes. So I think that, you know, honoring those kinds of efforts and finding the wins where we can and celebrating that early and often is going to be really important. I worked with Madeline Hunter 100 years ago at UCLA and you know, she's famous for the 7-step lesson plan and all that. But one of the things that she said was catch them being good. And I think that this year, that's going to be like mission critical. I'm going to find some way to love up a student and say, man, I can't believe you did that. Thank you. Just because the expectation is that this is going to be, well, I'll see if I can show you what I posted for my students, because when they talked about how they thought the year was going to go last year, I said, you know, sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So that's the expectation. And I think if we can positively reinforce what the students do well, we're going to be a whole lot better off. In fact, I don't even like seeing that on the screen. I'm getting rid of it.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
If you look at my, my picture, here's another representation.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
Amanda Heaver.
we're definitely dealing with forces much larger than ourselves. The Heritage Language Learning presentation, I believe, is 10 a.m., but I will, actually, I can double check right now. 11 a.m. Pacific. And like I said, I will post a link to that. So I'm gonna remind myself now, I've got a link to that. I've got the screen capture for the blogging stuff. I've got a future video on blogs. And oh man, there's one more thing that I promised somebody, and I feel like it was Rick. It'll come to me, or I'll have to watch this recording again. That's my active listening technique for the day. Repeat it out loud. Does anybody else have any questions? It's so nice to see people with masks because I have like this thing about living, and I'm sort of, you know, like a fan, but it's also, I get to imagine that all of you are smiling broadly at everything I'm saying underneath all that.
I mean, speaking for myself, I think I'd much rather be at home, but what can you do?
The best you can.
Apply for the accommodation. That's what you can do.
Thanks. Yeah, I would. You know, and nobody asked me, and I don't want to turn this into something that I don't want it to become, but I will say this. You should be where you're healthiest.
I just got mine this morning, so.
I'm rooting for all of these wonderful people to stay alive because I can't wait to hug you when it's safe to come back out into the open. But for right now, it's all about survive and advance. One of the things my students tease me about is the willingness I have to hang out and wait. And that's what I'm doing now. Thanks, Kyle. Much appreciated.
I have a quick question. It's off topic, but I see a lot of BIAs in here. Mr. Kanogo, how's it going? How are they deciding to use you guys this year?
That's a great question. That's what we're trying to find out ourselves. I think we're just going to go off with whatever the instruction. Kind of like what I'm predicting. It's going to be similar to what we did. You know, you lead, and then I'll just, you know, repeat what you said in different sauce, but, you know, kind of, you know, but we still don't know. It's pretty much following the teacher and their lead. But yeah, it's something we would like to know, and we'll see day one.
Well, hey, I'm going to go first. Will you send me an email, like on my school email, so that I can reply to both of you and say, hey, this is where my class is meeting. Can you come hang out? Because I would love it if you're not booked already to model that and capture it and share it in a way that we can like literally experiment with either a Zoom breakout room or, I mean, you got my wheels turning right now because I didn't realize that you might be free. So between now and the time that somebody accounts for all of your time, you want to come play and let's see how we can help students?
Sounds like a plan.
If you're open to it, send me an email and then we'll set up a separate Zoom and we'll figure it out. And then what we'll do is we'll do a little mini session with students. We'll record that. We'll share what works, what didn't. And then we'll see if we can help, like, give you guys a way to think about what you might want to recommend instead of just being told where to go and what to do.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm grateful for that. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm glad you asked, Rick. This is the kind of stuff that I think, you know, all of us to some degree or another are making this up as we go along. And there's no shame in admitting it. We're in what we're in. And my commitment as I go through this is just to be transparent. Some of this is not going to work the way I hope. But the whole point of collaborating and the whole point of, you know, sharing ideas and experimenting is that all of us care about our students. All of us care about making this work. And we want to do it in a way that balances what they need with what we need. You know, I did that empathy video, and by the end of it, I realized that all of us are really going to need to put our own oxygen masks on first, not just our N95s. We got to make sure that, you know, we're going to be shouldering a lot. Our students are going to be bringing us a lot, and that's beautiful and horrible. And I want to be open-hearted about that. I also want to make sure that I'm not completely depressed in the fetal position in a puddle by the end of the day. So, you know, we're going to have to do some self-care 101 around this. And part of that, for me at least, is taking the risk just to make these invitations, put this stuff out there, and see how we can help each other.
The Silkwood scene in the shower. That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah, so many movie references are coming up, and now you can just clip them and send them right out, and you don't even have to make the point.
They get none of my illusions, so that's exactly what I have to do. Teach.
Yeah, usually I'm much more lonely. Well, as we head down the home stretch, is there anything else I can answer for you? Or is there anything else that people want to contribute? Anything else that you're doing right now that you're excited about or that's working for you? Because I don't hear a lot of those headlines. I do have one request. If you've been with this call this long, I'm hoping that it didn't entirely suck and waste your time. If that's the case, would you kindly drop me an email to let me know, A, what you felt like was valuable about this, and B, what you'd like to see more of, or what you think could be better about this, so that I can keep refining things and making sure that I'm feeding you what you need if we have that kind of time and opportunity as the year goes on? Much appreciated. I like the animated thumbs up. All right, y'all. It's about 11:45, and I know that I just said, you know, we're only able to concentrate for about an hour and a half at a time, and here I am, and it's an hour and 45. So I'm going to end this call here, and if you have anything that you need, feel free to send me an email. Feel free to ping me on this blog that I set up. Some of you got my number. Whatever channel works for you. And as we get closer to day one, just remember to breathe. Give yourself those 60 seconds at a time. And if you can make the webinar tomorrow, I'll be happy to see you then. Otherwise, I will see you elsewhere in this whole virtual universe we're creating.
Thanks, Dr. Preston.
Okay, thank you all. I really appreciate you being here. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.